Yeah, so I thought to make a video on the books that I read in 2024. It's my first such video, but give it a shot. Uh, one of my favorite books which I read in 2024 was John Williams's Stoner. It's basically an academy novel based on the life of William Stoner, who is a professor in University of Missouri in the US. Uh, there are many people who told me that they didn't like the book because it was too sad. It made them too sad. It's a poignant, hopeless book. But on the contrary, I found a lot of hope in this book. Uh, William Stoner's life was okay. It was uneventful. Nothing great really occurred. But there was great honor in his life. The way he conducted himself. Uh, it the book is based in 1930s, 1940s, and it essentially speaks about how men conducted themselves in that era, and there's great learning in that sense. Yeah, I really love this book, Stoner. The other book which I read was Moin's The Monastery of Solitude. I read his last book as well, The Lost Fragrance of Infinity, and loved it. Moin is he is a royal from Gujarat. He's based in England now, and this book basically traces the voyage of a Greek philosopher, Plotinus. Moin retraces his voyage and talks about all the places which Plotinus was supposed to visit in his voyage from west to east. Then there was Marcus Aurelius's Meditation. This is a book which I have been wishing to read from a long time, and I finally read it. Marcus Aurelius was a Roman emperor. He's regarded as one of the most wisest men. Then there's this book Andaz Bayan or by Sanjiv Saraf, 100 Ghazals of Mirza Ghalib. It's a book which I picked up in Jashan Rekha Festival, which we had this year in Dubai in January. So in addition to these, there are many mountaineering books which I read this year, and one book led to the other. One of my favorites was Herzog's Annapurna. Maurice Herzog was a French mountaineer who summited Annapurna in 1950. It was the first time that an 8,000er peak was summited, and what really sets the book apart, or what I really liked about this book, was in addition to the difficulties and the trials and the struggles of climbing such a difficult mountain, and Annapurna even to this day is a very difficult mountain to summit, and to do it in 1950 was something else. So in addition to the struggles, it also talks about how they're setting up this route for the first time to the summit. Nobody had climbed Annapurna, so they had to set up the route for the very first time, which meant that they had to do multiple reconnaissances of the mountain. It was an expedition which lasted about 3 months. So the whole atmosphere is captured wonderfully in this book. And also finally, after they summited, Herzog and his French companion, there was a storm which hit Annapurna, and due to which many of Herzog's fingers had to be amputated. There's a very famous line at the end of the book, which in mountaineering folklore is has become a legend now. So he ends the book that there are other Annapurnas in the lives of men, which means that essentially when you summit a mountain, there are other things in the lives of men which also need to be summited. The other book which I read was The Snow Leopard by Matthiessen, Peter Matthiessen. He is the co-founder of the Paris Review literary magazine. This book is about Peter Matthiessen and his fellow traveler. They trekked in Nepal in 1973, and their aim was to sight a snow leopard, which is very rare. It's a beautiful book, beautiful prose, an absolute page turner. Yes, I really like this book. The other book which I read was Mick Conferey's Fallen. This is a biography on life of George Mallory. I was very excited about this book when it was published in June, but I found it pretty ordinary. I've read many biographies on George Mallory. There was nothing new really in this book, so to speak. Then there is Maria Coffey's Where the Mountain Casts Its Shadows. I like this book. It basically talks about the families of mountaineers and climbers. So yeah, I mean, mountaineers and climbers, these people are regarded as in some ways selfish, self-centered in their pursuits. They leave behind their families, and this book by Maria Coffey gives you the perspective of those families, because mountaineering it's a dangerous pursuit, right? And Maria, in that sense, had a personal tragedy. She lost her boyfriend, Joe Tasker, in 1982. Joe was trying to summit Mount Everest's northeast, unclimbed at that time, northeast ridge. So she had a personal tragedy as well. A nice book. Then there is Savage Arena by Joe Tasker himself. What a book! What a book! You know, it's one of those books which, when I'm reading this, I feel sad because it's coming to an end. I still not finished it. I'm currently reading it. But what a great book. Yeah. So in addition to all these, there are many other mountaineering books which I reread this year. And rereading a book is something I really found very rewarding, because when you read a book for the first time, you tend to skim some lines, or I mean, everything doesn't really go in you. But when you read it the second time, the third time, that's really when the book grows on you. So Into Thin Air, I read it I think a dozen times from the last couple of years. John Krakauer's book, based on 1996's tragic expedition to Mount Everest, where 8 people lost their lives. An absolute thriller. Then I also read The Climb by Anatoli Boukreev. It's also based on the same expedition. So basically in Climb, Boukreev on the allegations that John Krakauer had leveled on Boukreev, essentially blaming him for the tragedy that occurred in 1996. At least blaming a part of that blame he thinks should fall on Boukreev. Anatoli Boukreev then replies that in his book, The Climb. I really, honestly, but I like both these books. There was times when I found maybe Krakauer was not honest in trying to blame Boukreev for the tragedy. I thought there was some he was not completely honest about it. Then I read The Climb, then I read Into Thin Air again. I did it multiple times. in between I read Left for Dead. Is another book on 1996 tragedy. But at the end, I think both of these gentlemen, Boukreev unfortunately lost his life in 1997 while trying to climb Annapurna in winter. So I found both of these guys, their accounts. I don't think both of them were right in their own way. Then there was another book, The Moth and the Mountain, which I reread again. It's based on the life of Maurice Wilson. Maurice Wilson was a strange fellow. So his idea was that he will crash land an aircraft on Mount Everest's slopes, and then he will summit rest of the route, which obviously was a crazy idea. And the fact that he neither knew how to fly an aircraft or mountaineering did not deter Maurice Wilson. But Reinhold Messner, in his book The Crystal Horizon, one of the greatest climbers, Messner, he mentions about Maurice Wilson multiple times in his books. In his book, yeah, crazy fellow, but good book. Then there was Chris Bonington's The Everest Year, which I read. Chris Bonington, of course, is the greatest British mountaineer. He summited Mount Everest quite late in his career in 1985, and this book talks about that expedition. Then I reread Into Himalayas by Jono, one of my favorite books. I reread Reinhold Messner's The Crystal Horizon. And there were a few books, as usual, on Kashmir that I read. So I usually, whenever I go to Kashmir in summers, I pick up a book on Kashmir. So when I come back to Dubai, I still carry that love and nostalgia of Kashmir with me. So I read books on Kashmir once I'm back here. And this year I brought this A Foot Through Kashmir Valleys by Marion Doughty. This is a travelogue, a decent travelogue. Then I also read A Long Walk in the Himalayas by Gary Weir. This book is about a trek that he did from Ganges to Kashmir in 2003. Decent book. And then I read a political biography on Sheikh Abdullah by Chitralekha Zutshi. Sheikh Abdullah is Kashmir's tallest leader, and I found this biography really comprehensive. Talks about the entire life of Sheikh Abdullah in such detail, and she's quite objective in her account of Sheikh Abdullah. She doesn't take any sides. I think anyone who's interested in life of Sheikh Abdullah must read this book. So yeah, there was many number of books which I read and then reread this year. It was eventful. Mostly mountaineering books that I read this year, and I'm sure it will continue in 2025 as well. There are already 3 or 4 books which I've already purchased and are waiting to be read. And hopefully I'll make a video about them at the end of 2025. So Happy New Year to all of you, and stay safe with your families. Thank you so much.